Crooked Joe Biden is not only dumb and incompetent, I believe that he has gone mad, a stark raving lunatic with his horrible and country-threatening environmental open borders and DOJ FBI weaponization policies. He is a mental catastrophe that is leading our country to hell. We'll end up in World War III because of this man, and for no reason whatsoever.
I'm joined today by Mr. Legendary Energy himself, Anomaly. I liked campaign Trump. Trump had a lot of good things to say, leading us into World War III. In fact, he was particularly referencing Joe Biden's strikes on Yemen with that talk. So we're now striking Yemen over the past 48 hours. We've launched multiple airstrikes against them. And Trump sent out a tweet, which I will read to you guys in a second. But before I do that, the point of the tweet is that he's getting real feisty with Iran, which has always been my greatest concern. What are your thoughts, man? I know you have been as pessimistic or as skeptical, I should say, as I have. What are you feeling?
I feel like I'm optimistic. I guess it just doesn't always translate to politics because they always, stab us in the back. But when it comes to Iran, it's important to know the deep state for decades has wanted a war with Iran. The neocons have wanted a war with Iran. The war pigs and the war hawks have wanted a war with Iran. The Uniparty has wanted a war with Iran. I would say the media has pushed for a war with Iran. People like Netanyahu and others have been in front of Congress kind of egging on, or at least saying that this was inevitable, hoping that the United States would get involved with a war with Iran. So with that being said, I think a lot of people that like Trump are hoping that he has a plan or perhaps a strategy like the first time where it seemed like he was getting kind of close, but nothing really ever popped off. I would say this on the campaign trail, there was that second killer who had a lot more info on him. The first attempted killer, like Ryan, I forget his name. Maybe it was Ryan Ruth, or maybe that was the second one. I think
it was Crooks.
Crooks was the first one. Yeah, there was like nothing on that guy. And then the second one, he had a lot of videos. He had a lot of interviews like on YouTube where he had served in the Ukrainian military from America, and then he was used to recruit former terrorist organizations to I think like
Afghani fighters.
Afghani Taliban members, trying to get them to work with Ukraine. And then when all that happened, I'm not saying that for sure that was done on behalf of Ukraine, because it really could have not been. I don't know that for sure. This guy could have been rogue. But when Trump he tweeted Iran did it, that's when I was like, okay, Trump's going to probably try to start a war with Iran, because when he was running for office and it seemed like he was going to stop or prevent the war with Russia and Ukraine that they'd been boiling and trying to do for a decade, everything was Russia. Bernie Sanders supporters were Russians. Trump grandmas were Russians. People in Alabama were Russians. The media was Russians. You got to shut down RT. They just went Russia, 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 like Marsha, 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 because they wanted to start a war with Russia. Once they got that war, when Biden got in office, now everything's Iran. Instead of Russia hacking our power grid, it's Iran did this, Iran did that. So when you have a shooter that has a lot of connections to another country and Trump just sits there and repeats what you can almost guarantee the intelligence communities and the deep state, or whatever you want to call it, told him, I'm like, okay, this guy's he's not serious. But, it's him versus Biden. Obviously, we only had so much choice. I'm not going to make a claim that I don't know, but everything I just stated, that's what I wanted to say. As far as what Trump does, how he handles it, it's a complex issue. Time will tell. That's the only real answer.
No, of course. And let me cut off my detractors and say, first and foremost, I have defended Trump's bombastic rhetoric when it comes to talking shit to other countries. I've got a bigger button than you when he's talking to North Korea, or you're going to regret this. This will be the last thing you ever do, when he was talking to Iran in his first term. And I said, look, this is his form of diplomacy. This is how he talks. I get that. So I'm not like being a snowflake about this. I understand this is Trump's preferred method of communicating foreign policy. However, there are a lot of signs here that give me greater concern. I never really feared that we were actually going to go to war with North Korea, first and foremost because they have nuclear weapons, and I don't think that Trump wanted to play that game. Then he actually proceeded to go and cross the DMZ and meet with him and do all sorts of great things. So maybe some great things come from this. I don't know. But your points are really well stated and really important for people to process. The other thing that I'll add to it is that Lindsey Graham, of all people, flipped really hard on Zelensky and the Ukraine war just a couple weeks ago, and he had been the biggest booster for a decade, and I'm not exaggerating, a full decade. He had been boosting, basically antagonism towards Russia. All of a sudden, a couple weeks ago, he flips on that and he starts going, Zelensky, he's maybe we need to get new leadership in there. And I'm like, what's happening here? And then I started to think about it, and I'm like, wait a second. Well, I wrote it off because he's facing a primary challenger, and I thought maybe that's all it is, that the America First movement is really powerful, and he has to, acquiesce to them. Then I started to think about it, and I'm like, wait a second. What if they've told Mr. Graham that they're going to pivot to the big dog, that they're going to pivot to Iran, that's what the Lindsey Grahams and the John McCains of the world have wanted for 25, 30 years. So now I'm starting to think maybe that's the reason he backed off on the funding to Ukraine. Thomas Massie famously said a few days ago that, look, we have to funnel $50 billion into the military-industrial complex every single year, and it doesn't matter where the conflict is, they're going to get their bread. And once again, Thomas Massie appears to be right. Am I reading too much into it, or do you think I'm onto something there?
No, I mean, when I posted what Thomas Massie said to my Facebook, which is a older Trump audience. I mean, there's younger people too, but it's, it's Facebook. So there's going to be an older demographic. A lot of people really freaked out at the gall that Thomas Massie said that this was for the military industrial complex. But when you look at Afghanistan, we spent decades, trillions of dollars in Afghanistan. We pulled out, and within a year, we were in a war with Ukraine. So it does seem that as soon as you pull out of one thing, that another thing starts. And even when it was with COVID, I can't remember the exact dates, but COVID mania lasted for years. And then to me, it felt like it just had kind of finished off, where they're like, all right, like, let's go back to normal. And then like the next day, it's like, oh, war with Ukraine, let's fund that. So it does start to seem that way. And when it comes to Trump, he's an interesting character because he's so likable. And it does seem like he is counterculture in many ways. Even the JFK and Epstein files, I know a lot of people, including myself, don't think he's really going to release them. He said he's going to tomorrow with the JFK files, but it'll probably be redacted. If it's not, that's great, but he didn't even have to say he was going to do that. If he didn't say he was going to release them, nobody would have talked about it. I think it was kind of dead in the water. Like, everybody had kind of moved on and been like, yeah, that's not coming out. So he's an interesting character, but it does feel like things kind of roll out at suspicious timing. So, for example, the Ukraine war needed Joe Biden in office. I think Operation Warp Speed and the 15 days of slow the spread needed Trump in office. I don't think Republicans would have listened to Hillary. Now it's like Trump's the cleanup guy for Ukraine and possibly the starter for Iran. So maybe it's just spontaneous, but I don't think you're wrong or anyone else is wrong to suspect that this is just kind of somewhat of a show, or Trump is doing deals with the neocons. I mean, he definitely is, but one could argue that this is a good deal. He's doing what he can. Me, I don't like Lindsey Graham. And the fact that Lindsey Graham likes Trump so much, clearly they're striking some sort of a deal. Who knows what it is? It could be a primary deal. It could be, like you said, I would think that you're probably right, that Trump's like, listen, the mother of all wars that every neocon has been wanting for the last 30 years is on the horizon. And not to add too much, because I want to let you talk, but the whole Syria thing, Trump seemed like he wanted to stop what happened in Syria. He was not able to. They got Bashar al-Assad out. That holds a lot of weight when it comes to the big war with Iran. And, they're all interconnected, but I think that was a massive, massive move. And that happened within the last 6-7 months.
Here was what Trump said on the campaign trail when he was interviewed by Tim Pool.
I look at your policies, I see secure the borders, bring jobs back. I look at the Democrats and many Republicans, and it's foreign war and foreign expansion.
That's right.
What is that?
I think it's just a failed mentality. It's crazy. You can solve problems over a telephone. Instead, they start dropping bombs. I see recently they're dropping bombs all over Yemen. You don't have to do that. You can talk in such a way where they respect you and they listen to you. Viktor Orban of Hungary, the leader, they call him a strong man. Who cares if he's a strong man or not a strong man? He's a very powerful guy. He said the problem the world has is that Donald Trump is no longer president. When he was president, China didn't play around, Russia didn't play around, nobody played around, and we had no problems. Today, the whole world is.
That was actually the same, I think it was the same day or the day before I debated Vivek Ramaswamy LP National Convention because Tim was there, and I'm pretty sure that's when he got his opportunity to interview Trump. In fact, I know it is. It was the day prior. So that was the guy. That was the guy I voted for. That was the guy that I liked. I want to point out something that I think people need to be aware of, because I know most in my audience are very high level when it comes to geopolitics, but most people, like casual observers or listeners, are not. Iran's top allies, some of them, are Russia, Yemen, Lebanon, and Syria. Syria's been toppled. Lebanon, Hezbollah, has been destroyed by the IDF, or at least damaged significantly. The U.S. is now striking inside Yemen, and Russia has been bogged down in this multi-year war against Ukraine, in which they've suffered, according to some people, hundreds of thousands of losses. Some say it's less. I'm not sure. I just wanted to point that out, because if you were preparing to go to war with Iran, knowing that their ally network and knowing what a serious fight you would have on your hands, exactly what has happened is exactly what I would advise. And I say this as someone who's very anti-war, but I would say, hey, let's topple the Houthis. Let's topple Hezbollah. Let's topple or damage Putin. Let's get Assad out of power, who's their top ally in Iran was Assad. So all of those dominoes line up, and I'm like, this looks really, really bad. To steelman the opposite side of this, you could argue that, Trump, with his Miriam Adelson donations and everything else, he owes a lot to the Zionist cause, and he is trying to assuage them by saying, you don't have to worry about Iran. I'm not going to war with Iran because we've already, dismantled their entire alliance. I think that's the most optimistic view that I can take on this. Any thoughts? I don't know.
As somebody who loves America, it would be nice if I were more naive or ignorant, perhaps, where I could think, we're doing the right thing. That's always a great default. Like, yeah, we're at war, but we're on the right side. I mean, if you look at, after World War II, we helped with the communists. I mean, I don't know if we would say we helped them, but we worked with them to some point, established the UN. And then, the Russians got rid of the Bolsheviks and the communists, and they became Russia again after being basically infiltrated or taken over by communists who killed millions of people. Now it's almost like reverse, where Ukraine, in my view, are the new Bolsheviks. The Bolsheviks and that sort of ideology has taken over nearly all of Europe. And now it's like almost the reverse, where Russia does not have that, but it seems like we're working on the side that's trying to force that into Russia. I love the West. I love America unapologetically. But if you look at America, our culture has been falling apart over the last couple of decades. Our borders been open. I would say our schools have gotten worse. Our inflation's gotten worse. I still love this country, and it's a great country, but it's everybody thinks it's worse. Most Democrats, most Republicans. You look at Europe, everybody talks, including all the Republicans. They say Europe's falling apart. The UK is not the UK. Ireland's falling apart. McGregor's at the White House talking about it. Pretty much all of Europe is in shambles. And then if you look at parts of Europe that aren't in shambles, let's go to Poland, who's actually our ally. Well, now Poland's getting screwed over because of the Ukraine war. They've taken in, I think, hundreds of thousands or millions of Ukrainian immigrants, and these people are taking up the welfare programs. They're not assimilating. People are saying they're being rude. So now, and they elected some Donald Tusk character who's, it seems like a sneak. So it's like that was the one ally that isn't completely destroyed. Now let's look at like Russia. I'm not saying they're perfect. I'm not saying I like them or whatever, but it's like they're, a Catholic nation. They're not completely destroyed by LGBTQ XYZ, WX, and all these like globalist EU sort of policies of open borders. And what do you know? America's funding the Bolsheviks to, attack them. So when it comes to Iran, it's like, I'm not a fan of Iran. I'm not Muslim. I'm not Iranian. I'm not from there. I have no connection to their culture. And no offense to the people there. God bless them. But, I'm not in any rush to join, for lack of a better word.
Yeah,
but to think that we're right here, we were wrong in Afghanistan. We were wrong in Syria. Everything that myself, Tulsi Gabbard, and probably you said happened. We were wrong in Libya. We've destroyed Europe. We've destroyed America. The Western world is in shambles. But this time, it's just going to be a moral war because Donald Trump and his donors say so, and the neocons. And finally, the left-wing war hawks and neoliberals, the Lindsey Grahams and the John Boltons and Donald Trump, they're all on the same page on this one to help you. I mean, it's possible, but I would say it's in like I would, like I said, I wish I were ignorant enough to believe that, but I'm not. I think we're ruining almost everything we touch. And it's sad because I like America, but the West is in shambles, America's in shambles. And if you find a country that's not totally, caving to feminism and Bolshevik ideology, you could find an enemy of the United States, or at least whoever's puppeting our country right now, because it's probably not even us.
Well, this is a really important point. The Yemenis, the Houthis, which are really they were a rebel faction. They took over their country in 2013-14, I believe. Ever since then, there was basically a civil war, and then there was also the Saudi bombing campaign against their government. They perceive themselves to be a liberation movement against the control of, Saudis, Israel, whatever. But the reason that they're attacking our ships, or the reason that they've been so threatening towards America, is because America has spent a better part of a decade arming and funding the Saudis in that bombing campaign against the Yemenis. Yeah, they kept receipts on that. They know that happened. They're not very happy with us about that. So that's step one. Step two, and the one that really has them upset, is that the U.S. backed the Israelis in their siege on Gaza. And as a consequence of that, the Yemenis, the Houthis in particular, said over and over again, they said, look, we're not a real fighting force here. I mean, they talk a lot of shit, but we're not able to take on America. But we can fucking make your life hell in the Red Sea. We're going to blow up your ships, and we're going to make it really hard for shipping routes. And their only demand, get this, their only demand was that you cannot siege Gaza. And then there was the ceasefire that was negotiated with Trump's, envoy was responsible for getting that deal signed. And I was very grateful for it. The Israelis immediately renege on it, and they take the aid and food and water and a whole bunch of other stuff away from the Gazans once again. So the Houthis then start firing on our ships again. This is all a direct response to Israel's actions. This isn't about the U.S. The Houthis are pissed at Israel. The Houthis are trying to defend the Gazans, who are some of their allies. I mean, it's just so irritating that the narrative and your point earlier about how if you were going to start a war with Iran, you couldn't do it with Kamala Harris. You couldn't do it with Joe Biden, but you could do it with Donald Trump. It's so important that people understand that, because I think that's exactly what's happening, is that they would never buy the argument that our ships are being attacked, and we have to take out these Houthis to defend shipping lanes if it was Kamala Harris saying it. But Donald Trump says it, and they just go, yeah, history started today. That's all I need to hear.
Before I add more, I want to ask you a question, because you were mentioning that Saudis are fighting in Yemen or against them. I don't know if they're directly doing it or funding it. You named America, one of the richest, most powerful countries in the world with the biggest military. Saudi Arabia, who is easily one of the richest countries with the wealthiest people in the Middle East. And then Israel, which if it's not Saudi Arabia or UAE, I would guess Israel's up there with powerful, a lot of capabilities. So do you think that the U.S., Saudi, and Israel are just thinking these people can't do anything? The Houthis obviously stand no chance against those three countries. And then even with Iran, I mean, it only gets interesting. I don't know if I'd say interesting, but it only gets debatable if Russia or China kind of got involved. But do you think that's what our allies are thinking? These people stand no chance. We'll do whatever we need to do to the Houthis. And if Iran steps up, they can't compete with America, Israel, and Saudi Arabia.
Well, I mean, it's obviously true. But then add to it that Yemen, the Yemenis, are the poorest people in the Middle East. They are the absolute poorest. Hundreds of thousands of their kids starved to death over the past decade as a consequence of this siege. So, right. I mean, they have been treated with I wouldn't say it's as bad, but it's pretty fucking close. What's happened to the Yemenis is what's happened to the Gazans. And yes, I know October 7th happened. I'm not diminishing any of that, okay? I'm just saying these people have suffered terribly, and they are the poorest in the Middle East. So yes, your point is well taken. Yeah, the alliance is overwhelmingly powerful comparatively.
Like Trump said to Zelensky, you don't have the cards right now. He left his Charizard at home, so he didn't have the cards to beat Trump in the Pokemon battle. But do you think that's how Trump and everybody feels about Yemen, where, can they attack ships? Sure. But, is that Trump's logical response where he's like, you could do that, but he's like, I could also do bigger things. So, do you think that they will chill out because he said that, because they're so outmatched? Or do you think that it'll turn into my question is, what's your concern in the sense of, is your concern, obviously you're concerned with the lives there and people who've been done wrong, But also, do you think it could end up like an Afghanistan situation where we just spend 20 years and run in circles? Or do you think it's just going to drag a bigger war that has massive consequences?
That's the concern for me. Yeah, I mean, sure, my secondary concern is the lives that are being lost. I mean, and that for many people, that would be their first concern. My first concern is still America and Americans. So like, that's my primary concern here, is that if you end up in a war with Yemen and Iran gets involved, let me just do this because it's really important that people understand, you know, I'm not being hyperbolic here. Let nobody be fooled. The hundreds of attacks being made by Houthi, the sinister mobsters and thugs based in Yemen who are hated by the Yemeni people, that's not true, all emanate from and are created by Iran. Any further attack or retaliation by the Houthis will be met with great force, and there is no guarantee that that force will stop there. Iran has played the innocent victim of rogue terrorists from which they've lost control, but they haven't lost control. They're dictating every move, giving them the weapons, supplying them with money and highly sophisticated military equipment, and even so-called intelligence. Every shot fired by the Houthis will be looked upon from this point forward as being a shot fired from the weapons and leadership of Iran, and Iran will be held responsible and suffer the consequences, and those consequences will be dire. Donald J. Trump. President.
So do you not, I mean, obviously I know you to know that you don't like that statement, but is your issue with this statement not just that he's playing hardball, but that he's blaming a whole nother country? Like, you know, as if like, because even America, we have all these allies, but I don't think we have any say over what Israel does. I think it's really reverse, you know, to a large extent. But even our greatest allies and Canada or whoever, no, but we don't have total control over what they do. Like even now, all our allies seem to be disagreeing with us on almost everything. So is that your issue, that he's basically saying like control them, even though they're allies, but I'm sure that they don't have total say so.
Yeah, they don't. I mean, think about Ukraine, for instance. Like Ukraine has been funded to the tune of a couple $100 billion from the U.S. and a couple $100 billion more from the EU. Like, but we still can't dictate exactly what Zelensky does or who he attacks or how he attacks. And so it's just ridiculous. And then also extrapolate that logic. I mean, if you're going to argue that because Iran is arming and funding the Houthis, which I think is true to a certain extent, that they're culpable for everything that the Houthis do, well, then what the fuck does Russia have to say about our arming and funding of Ukraine for the past 2.5 years or 3 years? I mean, that's a direct. Then basically Putin could say, "Hey, just hold up that Truth Social post from Trump and say, yeah, you guys have been striking my country for the past 3 years. We're at war now," and it's hypocritical. And I know because we're the most powerful, we're allowed to be hypocrites, but it's just fucking ridiculous.
I'm not as educated on the Yemen stuff. That's why I wanted to ask you questions, kind of get into it. I know there are alignments, etc., but I'm not too deep into what's been going on there. With that being said, I guess my concern is this, although obviously human lives are always a concern and people being hypocrites, but you know, what we've been told by the left mostly, but also neocons, is in Ukraine that this is for our best interest. I think Zelensky and his backers are the new Bolsheviks, and I think that they're trying to do what they did to Russia before. Like, I think it's ridiculous. I think it's against our interests. I think it's against Russia's interests. I think it's against Europe's interests. I think it's only hurt, literally, I mean, it hurt Germany because of certain things that happened because of the war. Like, I don't really think it's benefited anybody. I don't think it's benefited Ukrainians. You know, I can't think of a single person that it has benefited except for people that wants to get Europeans killed and destroyed. Like, that's the only thing I could really even think of. That's what I think. When it comes to what we've done in the Middle East, like, you know, we were told, and this is, I tried to push this point because a lot of people are missing this angle because they're seeing like Trump or not Trump. This is not an attack on Trump. This is just the reality of American foreign politics. You know, they told us that Al-Qaeda did 9/11 and everybody hated Al-Qaeda in America. Understandable, rightfully so. Like, we got to go after Al-Qaeda because they attacked us on our own soil. 10 years later, a former Al-Qaeda member runs Syria because the United States and our allies have been funding rebel groups and terrorist groups in Syria. So, like, I'm trying to get along with normies and Republicans, but it's hard because you know, I'm not trying to act like I'm so great or anything, but it's like they're missing so many points of the story. It's like, you should hate Al-Qaeda because of what happened and, you know, everything. Yet you're ignoring the fact that our taxpayer dollars funded terrorists to let an Al-Qaeda member literally take over Syria, and nobody's talking about it. Yep. Is that good for our foreign policy to let an Al-Qaeda member take over a country when we were told they attacked us on 9/11? Yet nobody cares. And all these Republicans talking about Mahmoud Khalil, there's a whole nother conversation about that, because it is kind of a legal precedent and an interesting cultural conversation to have. But the real thing is, like, let's just say he's everything that Republicans think he is. He's the worst person in the world. He's doing all these things. Is he worse than the Al-Qaeda member who's running Syria with the help of so it's like, I just, and they're going after, like, I just saw a Jewish student got expelled from Columbia. He was Jewish because he had led a protest, and perhaps he broke a rule or like went into a classroom. I didn't fully look into it, but it's like, let's just say he's the worst left-wing protester of all time. Is this Jewish American who's not pro-Israel worse than the Al-Qaeda member that's running Syria? So it's like, they say the Trump administration is going after all these terrorists. Yet in reality, in my opinion, he's just using the word terrorist like George Bush and just basically trying to quash any criticism of his war. So, for example, let's just say he's completely wrong about the war. Let's just say you're completely right. I'm not saying you are, but that's hypothetical, right? Sure. Trump's administration would probably consider, and I'm not trying to like throw this label on you, but they'd probably consider you some sort of like they're using these words so loosely. They're calling Daryl Cooper, he's not that word, but he's that word apologist. And they're trying to get all these labels to stick so they could censor, shut people up, and get people in trouble. So it's like, even if all these things were true, I can't stand the fact that Trump is now using every agency in the government to essentially police hate speech against the country that, we're absolutely at war with. And it's like, I can't say that, or I'm saying we're in a war with them as our ally, but it's like, I can't even say that country controls my country. That's considered hate speech under Trump's little anti-Semitism rules. And it's like, we're fighting all these wars, and now they're trying to kneecap American citizens who speak out against them by overusing the word terrorist and saying that everyone is that. I knew Trump was going to do certain things, but once again, I think he even exceeded or under whatever, over or under, whichever way you're going, like my expectations, he has done even worse. Like I gave him a lot of leeway, and I didn't expect, RFK Jr. to be looking for anti-Semitism and Fruity Pebbles, but here we are. That's sarcasm, but it's like, no, apparently really that's is. What, dude. And real quick, sorry, I saw two articles. One that said that they stopped, I think it was Haaretz that reported to Israeli publication that there were reports that the United States stopped doing human trafficking and stuff with ICE in order to look into anti-Semitism. And then I saw another article that said that the United States had some like legal battles with people with disabilities that have been discriminated against, and they paused those in order to, basically monitor the internet or for anti-Semitism. So it's like, it shows where the priorities are at, right? Right.
I mean, just to give you an example, like when the first rumors of strikes against Yemen started a couple days ago, I tweeted out the lie: we're bombing Yemen to defend U.S. shipping lanes. The truth: the U.S. backed the Saudis in bombing Yemen for a decade and then backed Israel in their war on Gaza, which is an ally to Yemen. The Houthis' attacks are a response to what the U.S. and Israel did. It's pretty hard to argue that this is defensive. If anything, this is all in the defense of Israel. Support it if you want, but just be sure you know the circumstances that got us here. Narratives at the outset of war are always overly simplistic because they only serve to galvanize support for the attacks. Please just think for yourself. I got, dozens, maybe hundreds of absolutely furious replies to that from Trump supporters who are like you're oversimplifying. It's like, no, dude, I'm not oversimplifying. Well, of course I'm oversimplifying. I'm talking about 15 years of fucking history in a region that's not my own. Yes, I'm simplifying, but the reason I put that post out is because I wanted to get it out early so that the people that just are hearing, oh, they're attacking our Navy ships, of course we have to fucking blow them to smithereens. Like, there's more to this. The history matters. The lead up to this matters. It would be like, it's the exact same thing that happened after 9/11. It was just like, well, Al-Qaeda attacked us for our freedoms. They had no gripes against. They had no legitimate gripes against us. It's like, if I explain to you the gripes that Osama bin Laden had against the United States, that does not mean that he was right to do what he did. I'm just explaining that there is a CIA term known as blowback, and there's a reason these people fucking hate us, and it ain't because of our freedoms. It's because of our bombs and our sanction regime and our blockades that killed hundreds of thousands of Iraqi kids, that has kept Gaza from the Palestinians from being free forever. They have a lot of justification. I just think that that was the aspect of the America First non-interventionist Trump round 2 camp that I fell into, that I liked a lot, that gave me hope that, like, okay, we just went through 20 years of unconstitutional, illegal, immoral wars predicated off of lies. You guys know what's up. Many of you fought in it. I know you guys are not going to fall for the next fucking trap. And I think most of the vets aren't falling for this trap, but I think a lot of Trump supporters that aren't vets are just looking at this going like, they fucking attacked our ships. Fuck these people. Let's blow them up. And it's just not that simple.
Well, one thing I learned the first term, because I'm usually on page with a lot of people, as soon as the lockdowns and Operation Warp Speed came, and I know people could rewrite history, et cetera, but like most people, instead of logically thinking about it, and I used an example on my podcast. I said, I've been trying to study and get good at trivia. I'd like to be on Jeopardy one day. I'm not smart enough now, but I'm trying to learn a lot of stuff. I learn by reading for myself, not by listening to like what other random people say. So I'll give an example. The largest bird in the world is an ostrich. The smallest bird in the world is a hummingbird or a bee hummingbird, right? Imagine if Trump was on stage and he said, the biggest bird's a penguin, the smallest bird is a bluebird. And I'm like, well, that's not true. And people go, well, why do you think that? I'm like, well, because I do my own research outside of what he said. But he's like, but maybe he means this. And it's like, or maybe he's just wrong. So it's like, it's the same sort of logic as the reason I got the pandemic right and a lot of Trump supporters got it wrong is because I'm not going off of what Trump says and then trying to figure out how to make an excuse for it.
Exactly.
I'm my own person who just so happens to line up with Trump a lot of the time. But when I don't, I'm confident in my approach because I'm researching and reading and learning on my own. So, I've already seen how all these, and in unison, even when Trump ran against DeSantis, I don't trust DeSantis. I didn't vote for DeSantis. To be honest, I don't even really like DeSantis, but I do reporting. So Trump would lie about the vaccine. DeSantis would say something honest. And I'd be like, why did Trump lie about that? Or Trump moved to Florida and then he posted this thing where he's like, Florida's one of the worst states to do this, worst states to be a cop. Like he was just shitting on Florida. And I was like, why'd you move there if it's so bad? It's crazy. But people got so mad at me because it's like all the Trump supporters, they just say the same 3 things in a loop when they're just in that like group thing. So, I'm not going to lie and act like I'm really educated completely on the Yemen situation, but I have no doubt in my mind that most people are not even logically or rationally thinking about it. They're literally just defending and doing whatever he says. And, with the Israel and Palestine situation, there's a few things I want to say real quick that have become really alarming to me, where I think the Zionist Israel side is becoming like really emboldened in what they're doing and saying. And it's getting just a little weird for me, who has always said they have a right to exist. And I understand why, I understand why they'd want to do what they do, but I'm an American citizen and I should be allowed to say that I don't agree if my taxpayer dollars are going there, et cetera, the speech laws. So I've been very reasonable. Yeah, I've been called names 1,000,000 times. They've been the rudest people to me, but whatever.
Me too.
I've seen an evolution in their thoughts where if you're just paying attention, no matter how pro-Israel you are, certain people are lying, because 5-6 years ago, they said, we just want to exist. They made all sorts of like PragerU style videos where they're like, literally Israel's this small little thing and all they want to do is just keep it, and everybody's attacking them and all they do want to do is keep it. And it's like, yeah, I believe that in 2019 and 2018. I was like, yeah, that's reasonable. Like, why are they doing that? But now they're all saying, well, Palestine doesn't even exist, which then gives them justification to take all of it. So it's like, if you believe that now, did you also believe that then? And were you just not telling us because you knew it would sound extreme? So it's like this incremental thing they're doing where I've seen them dehumanize the entire people there, where they're like, I've watched multiple videos people making on Instagram, et cetera, these propaganda style videos where they go, I used to think that most Palestinians were innocent, but now I've come to the conclusion that most of them are not, and most of them are in on it. So now they're justifying basically just killing everybody in Palestine, because they're like, even if they're not all warriors, even the women and kids, they're all Hamas. Let's kill them all. And then it's like, well, that's kind of extreme. That's a new era of war that was not normal 5 or 10 years ago. And they've used certain events as like a precedent to do that. And then you look in the United States, where I've read the anti-Semitism rules for years and all these pro-Israel it's like you can't do anything in this country without pledging allegiance to Israel. If you're a United States government, trying to get a grant with the U.S. or a government grant, you need to prove your loyalty to Israel, not America. It's crazy. So it's like with all of these things, right? Now Trump is, are you accurately pointing out Hamas and being like, that's Hamas and that's not? No, what they're saying is they're Hamas, the kids are Hamas, the women are Hamas, everybody who's supporting them are Hamas, you're all Hamas and you're a terrorist. and terrorists don't have the First Amendment. First, they started with the green card, and all the lemmings said, well, it's just because he has a green card. I mean, yeah, he's never committed a crime and he's a legal citizen, but he said this, he said that. So now you're saying people with a green card don't have the First Amendment, even if they didn't commit a crime. Never heard that before, but it's an interesting legal precedent. Okay, two days later, I think it was in Reuters, it came out to say that the Justice Department is now looking into U.S. citizens to see which one of them broke a terrorist act, because now they're calling them all terrorists. And it's like, you know, they could call Trump a terrorist for siding with Russia over Ukraine because, you know, Ukraine is our ally and Russia has killed people in war and invaded a country. What's stopping Russia from being labeled a terrorist organization? One, they're too big, they're too rich, they're too powerful. And, unfortunately, America can't. But if they were smaller, America would just label them a terrorist organization. And they would say that Putin is a rogue extremist dictator. And then it would make all criticism of Ukraine a terrorist act. So it's like, it's so obvious to me what the Trump administration is doing and what those type of people are doing. So, in Yemen, I'm not familiar with it, but I'm guessing that's the narrative too. For a while, they were probably doing a lot of bombing, a lot of fighting with the Houthis. And now that they've brainwashed everybody on the television to justify basically slaughtering an entire population in another country, they're probably thinking like, what's going to stop us from doing that here? Let's ramp it up, because all these provisions that we had a few years ago, like, we probably shouldn't do that. Now they're like, nah, we probably, and here's the part that I just need to remind people, all this funding in Ukraine, and all this funding in Israel and all this funding in the Middle East, it's like, things are really ramping up. So, it's not fun for anybody, but it's also just like, I see the extreme, like when people are at war and their countries are going to war and hundreds of thousands of people are dying, they feel a lot more entitled to do a lot crazier stuff that in a safe peacetime would not really be happening.
Yeah. Well, and what concerns me is that, the Trump supporters in particular ought to be able to see through this shit at this point. After the global war on terror, all of the deceit of WMDs and everything else, they ought to understand that they're being lied to at the outset of a new war. They figured it out with the Russia-Ukraine war. But apparently when it comes to Israel-Palestine, they can't figure it out. When it comes to Yemen, they can't figure it out. It's like, anytime that the antagonist in the situation is in fact Israel, suddenly their media sphere doesn't allow them to figure it out. Interesting how that works, right? But I'm just noticing patterns here. I don't know. But it's very frustrating because, just imagine if you were born in Yemen in 2005 and you've just spent the past 20 years half of your life. So from the time you were 10, it was like semi-peaceful. And then ever since then, up to, manhood, you've just been getting bombed and starved. Do you think that you'd be a fucking cool person, or do you think that you'd be an absolute savage? Because you had to survive hell. You would probably have to be really, really tough. So, the point I'm trying to get to is, the U.S. participated. They walked hand in hand with the Saudis in destroying Yemen for the past decade. They've created a really militaristic, really savage group of people. And then they go, oh, well, now we have a reason for war because they're attacking our ships. And it's like, well, you started this process. It's the same thing that the Israelis did to the Gazans. It's like, well, you sieged these people for fucking 50 years. Do you think that you have no culpability in this? Yeah, okay, sure, they have become violent terrorists. I agree with you. Where is the culpability on your side? And it's so frustrating that message, saying that message, has people accuse me of saying, well, you're arguing that these people are good and moral and blah, blah, blah. It's like, that's not what I'm fucking saying. I'm saying what they did on October 7th was fucking evil. And if the Yemenis strike our ships, I think you ought to fucking blow them up. I'm just being straight with you. But we need to understand the history. We have to understand the history if we're going to stop this cycle of death and destruction and, bankrupt ourselves. And instead of getting a rational response from most people, the response, as usual, is, oh, you're a fucking Houthi sympathizer. It's like, no, I'm not.
I saw the response to Twitter, the worst people on Twitter, to Daryl Cooper on Joe Rogan.
Yep.
And then I listened to the episode and I was like, I felt like he was playing it pretty safe, and I felt like he explained himself pretty I thought it was going to be crazier. When I listened to it, I thought he played it more than safe. So I'm like, geez, that's crazy that they overreacted that way. But, it's like the psychology of a situation. In order to be good at reading other people, you have to be able to understand their side, not justifying it, but understand it. and some people are not trying to do that. With that being said, in Yemen, I'm not saying, I don't think it ever would have been, no offense to them, but I don't ever think it would have been like a budding society, and I'm sure they would have had their own problems. But this is the issue when America gets involved. And it almost sounds like a liberal talking point when libertarians say it, or I say it, or Thomas Massey or someone says it. Like, I understand how it comes across liberal, because I even a couple of years ago, I was thinking that was like more left wing. But it's like, I'm not a self-hating American who thinks that all of these societies would have been great. But if you really look into stuff, like, I believe that we made Syria worse. Was Syria perfect? No, but I think objectively we made it worse, and now we helped an Al-Qaeda member lead it. Libya, I absolutely think we made worse. All the videos I've been seeing of Gaddafi, it's clear why they wanted to off him. Like, he was just being very blunt and very straightforward. He was like a Libyan version of Trump, really, just talking shit, telling everybody. Except the difference is Trump's a billionaire from America with connections, and Gaddafi's an African leader with no. He didn't have those type of connections. So they off Gaddafi, and then it left a slave trade there. I don't think Russia's great, but I think what we're doing, we've destroyed Ukraine. We've slaughtered how many Ukrainian soldiers to, this war. All of Europe is messed up, and I'm not taking full blame for that, but America in the 50s, 60s, 70s, like, we were the leader. We are the cool country that everybody looks up to and tries to be like. And the USAID, I think, is just one side of that, just showing how we've kind of bankrolled just the destruction of the entire world. So it sounds, I get it to Republicans. It sounds like a self-hating liberal where you're like blaming America for all these other countries. And once again, I don't think Yemen would have ever been good, but it's like, if I've come to the conclusion that America helped destroy the UK, destroy France, destroy Germany, literally like every country imaginable, it's like, what are the chances that we're just, there's two countries that we're right on, we're just wrong on all. And this is not self-hating. It's just, I believe this is why people like Trump. I believe that our country has basically been swallowed alive by an elite class that are calling the shots, and they're doing it at the expense of America. These people have no loyalty to America, even like Zelensky. Like, I don't think he has loyalty to the Ukrainian people. I think he's a puppet and a pawn, and he doesn't mind getting Europeans slaughtered. So in America, that's what I feel like is going on. It's just hard for Trump supporters to fathom it, because it's like, yeah, we agree on all that, but Trump's our guy. And it's like, I hope so. I definitely think he's the best guy now, but he definitely takes a lot of money from people who want to start war with Iran. So maybe this is the one out of the last 50. We're 0 for 49, and maybe this really is the one, and we're really helping the people of Yemen. But I don't know as much as you do about it. But yeah, my default tells me that we're being lied to, obviously. And one thing I want to say real quick, is, you can't talk about false flags at all, because, it's just a conspiracy theory and it's hateful. And anytime a tragedy happens, then they say, like, you're really bad for saying it now because of the tragedy. So why wouldn't the world leaders do a false flag? I'm not saying this is one, but it's like, it's been the most effective strategy throughout the decades, because you can't get support for a war with America. Tragedy happens, support. It's happened throughout history, and including our allies. I mean, I'm not going to name the specific ones now, but you could find our allies trying to do false flags on us to get us involved in a war. And if we're not allowed to question it, while Donald Trump is essentially passing hate speech laws that would deem it hateful. I mean, I'm not going to name the two events because I don't even want to talk about them. It might like register as hate offense, but he compared a recent tragedy to a historical tragedy and said, like, denial of that is denial of this. And it's like, I don't know anybody who's denying it, but I do know that Haaretz published an article talking about, the Hannibal Directive. I don't think they're denying the event. They're just published an article in an Israeli paper about a certain directive that they gave out, and then they got sanctioned by the government. Any reporter that talks about it's being anti-Semitic. So it's just, it's just exhausting. And I think the elites they'll get whatever they want at this point, and most Trump supporters will support it because they just like Donald Trump, which begs the question, like, is he the greatest president of our lifetime, or is he the biggest deceiver that is just like the perfect, guy for the right to believe?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's one or the other. I'll say that. And I'm not sure which, but I'll tell you, if we end up with a war against Iran, then he is the deceiver, as far as I can tell, because that is just like people really need to understand how different this is. I mean, Iraq and Afghanistan are backwaters compared to Iran. And they are, and we didn't even win those wars really. And Iran is also such a significant ally to Russia. Like the odds that Russia doesn't get involved are diminishingly small. But here's what really concerns me. So I'm starting to like step back and I'm looking at the full chessboard, right? And I'm like, if I'm Donald Trump and I'm Vladimir Putin, and you see them trying to negotiate peace in Ukraine, did these guys have a meeting where they say, look, like Trump goes to him along with, you know, Netanyahu in tow, and he says, hey, we're going to stop funding Ukraine. We're going to bring this war to an end. You get the fucking eastern 20% of Ukraine and no admission into NATO. Basically, you get everything that you wanted at the outset of this war, and we avoid fucking hot war between the two largest nuclear powers in human history. Sound good? All right, here's what I need. I need you to fucking back off when we attack Iran. That's all I need. You have to abandon your ally, and if you do that, you get Ukraine just like you wanted, and you don't have NATO on your fucking southern border. I'm just saying, like, tell me that doesn't sound like Trump having a negotiation with Vladimir Putin. Now, will it happen? I don't know, but I'm just saying it's plausible.
Definitely is. And I think that's where, at bare minimum, the Russia-Ukraine war fits into the whole Israel-Palestine and Iran situation, because with Russia spreading, you know, before that, I don't think they really had any imminent threat, or they had no war they were fighting, active war. Now they do. So at bare minimum, you know, say you're playing a game of Risk with no care of actual human life or culture or anything, you know, technically starting a war with Russia, sacrificing money and people would benefit that. You know, it's just when you look at, this is where Tucker Carlson kind of comes in, and he's been, I think, a leading voice when it comes to Ukraine and Russia. He very well understands that the modern Ukrainian regime is the Bolshevik regime. The Bolsheviks are being funded by America. The Ukrainian people are completely clueless. And, you know, he hates it because outside of the game of Risk that America's playing, what if winning means you lose everything? What if winning the war means you lose your country, you lose your dominant religion, you lose your ethnic majority? You know, it's already happening in America, and they just say it's racist to notice. It's happening in Europe. You know, it's like winning. What if winning the war means you literally just like everything's
hollow
worse,
yourself
you know,
out.
as far as like Europe is worse, like Ireland. And then Joe Rogan recently talked about it. He's like, why can China do this? But if a white country does this, it's racist. It's like, you know, this question probably should have been asked 30 years ago, but maybe nobody was paying attention because it was so sneakily done. But it's like, of course, like I'm not even Irish. I have no national pride for Ireland, but I'd rather Ireland be Irish people when I go there. Like that, you know, Daryl Cooper nailed it. He said diversity is when you go to different countries and see those people, not when every country is like a hodgepodge of the same thing. Like that's actually not diversity at all. You've ruined diversity. So I think that's kind of the point where it's like on a game of Risk and a chess game, is fighting Russia better for the Iranian war for Israel and America? And sure, I guess, but at what cost? At the cost of literally all of Western civilization crumbling. And then Republicans and Trump supporters are like, this guy wants to destroy Western civilization on a college campus. Okay, sure, deport him if it makes you feel good, but our civilization's already being destroyed. It's not like one green card holder on a college campus is going to destroy Western civilization. Our own leaders in both parties have been doing it for literally 5 decades now, you know, to the point where Europe is already completely destroyed. It's not
you're right.
one guy who did it.
Let me play, because Conor McGregor was actually at the White House podium today saying some of this. Let me play it real quick.
What is going on in Ireland is a travesty. Our government is the government of zero action with zero accountability. You know, our money is being spent on overseas issues that has nothing to do with the Irish people. The illegal immigration racket is running ravage on the country. There are rural towns in Ireland that have been overrun in one swoop, that have become a minority in one swoop. So issues need to be addressed, and the 40 million Irish Americans, as I said, need to hear this, because if not, there will be no place to come home and visit.
Just a quick interjection to remind you that if you want to support the show, the easiest way to do so is to get effing cozy by going to mypillow.com and using the promo code LOCKDOWN to buy you some Giza sheets, or a cozy pillow, or a cozy bed, or cozy pet items, they got everything. Go to mypillow.com/lockdown or mypillow.com, promo code lockdown, and get you some cozy. I can't help but notice, and I'm sure you notice it too, he's coming over here and he's saying that, thinking that like we're this bastion of hope and I don't know, that we're going to back them up. It's like, hey, Connor, look around you, buddy. Every single word he said applies to the United States. We don't have any fucking representation. We have government that doesn't do our bidding. We have open borders and immigration that's absolutely changing, the framework and the makeup of this country at a very rapid clip to the tune of probably 20 million over the past 4 years. Like, we are Ireland, Connor. Hello.
Well, I think we have, I don't even know if I'd say better opposition, but I would say we have sneaker opposition that will embrace Connor, because I'm sure his political parties will not. Actually, the media smeared him pretty bad in Ireland, so a lot of people don't even like him there. He might have done what they said, though. I don't know. He's been wilding out the last couple of years. I'm not really sure. However, this is the issue with America, is the opposition in America is so much more promising that everybody thinks that we're fixing the issues. And you get called far right if you notice this. And I guess the quote unquote far right is the only one that seems to be complaining about this. I guess normal Trump supporters are too. But it's like, if you just do the math on, how many illegal immigrants Biden led in office, and then it's like how many illegal immigrants Trump's deporting, it's never going to add up. And that's part of the issue with the Democrat and Republican Party. It's like the Democrat screws over the country. Trump gets in, he fixes a few things, but his first term, he really didn't do really that much at all. And then it's like in Q4, he does Operation Warp Speed, 15 days of slow spread, and anything good he ever done, he completely destroyed. So it's like I think he did a terrible job the first time. Then Joe Biden gets in and he just keeps destroying America. He opens the border. He just destroys everything. Then Trump gets in, and it's like Trump undoes 1/20th of what Joe Biden did, and then someone else gets in, and then they open the floodgates again. So it's like, I don't know who said this, but it's just like, the left is like a speed rail to communism, and the right is just like slowing down the train, by 10 miles, and they're never driving the other direction. In fact, if someone says that, Thomas Massey and Rand Paul said, all these dollars that Elon's talking about, they're funding a spending bill that is not only extending a lot of these programs, but also it's doing Biden's spending bill that's going to raise this 20%. And then Trump tries to kick him out of the party, and all the dumb Trump supporters are like, yeah, get Thomas Massey out of there. He's a rhino. It's like, dude, I don't know any other way to put it. Like, I'm not expecting Trump to reinvent the wheel. However, what I do want is Republicans to wake up. And, I hate to say this, but I really don't, because they've been so mean to me the last couple of weeks. I don't mind giving it back a little bit. The generation that was so lazy that let America just fall apart because they just didn't want to think about things, Trump made them think about a few things. And then they're like, you know what? He's right. Let me just export all my thoughts to Donald Trump. And now they're doing the same thing with him, where it's like, I'm not necessarily blaming Donald Trump, because just like he said, Zelensky doesn't have the cards. I know Trump acts like he has the cards, but I would say Trump probably has even less cards in his pocket than Zelensky. Zelensky probably has more leverage against Trump than Trump has against the banking class, people that totally own our country. So it's like, I'm not even saying he can do everything, but if we're going to fix it, then it requires everybody to realize the game being played, and then kind of, let Trump know that it's not enough, and let the banking class know it's not enough. But as long as they have Trump to just sheep herd everybody, it's never going to end. So I don't think a lot of Republicans can process this, where it's like, I'm not blaming Trump. I'm not saying he can do all this stuff, but we probably need to do this. It's the same thing that Elon says when it comes to all the spending stuff that he seems to be working on. He's like, the country is screwed if we keep running up the debt this point. Like, he's like, we're done. It's over. So it's not like we have, like we don't have to. We have to do that. We have to do that. And same thing with certain things in this country. It's like there's patterns going on right now. Like, this country is going to be horrible in 20 years. Horrible. Like, there, not just economically, but demographically. I'm not saying everybody's bad, but I do believe in just different places, and every place is not the same. Like, that's true in America. Like, no offense, I don't want to live in Philadelphia. I don't want to live in these major cities that are terrible. So it's like, if you just do the math, it's like most of the country is going to look like that in 20, 30 years. So, I think a lot of Trump supporters like, you're being too tough on them. And it's like, dude, our country is like washed, and it's a hard thing to explain or process that. You have to pay attention and actually provide some resistance. You know, if every Republican said, hey, Trump, I noticed you took hundreds of millions of dollars from a foreign, basically lobbyist or an American citizen who lobbies on behalf of a foreign country, I noticed that, then he probably wouldn't be doing so much for them. But if you get mad at me and say, who paid you to say that? Who paid me to say that Trump has taken over $600 million? So I'm the bad one for taking $0. But Trump's the good one for taking $600 million because you like him more than me. It's like Stone Cold Steve Austin for these boomers, man. They just can't get over it.
Oh, it's a great point. And I was boosting Thomas Massie because there was a major op last week to try and get him thrown out of office. And Trump led the charge on that, along with DC Drano and these other paid pundits. I don't think these people have any sincere principles at all. I'm just being totally honest. But you wouldn't believe the replies I was getting. There was intel, like an op that was ran against Massey, and as a consequence, they had messaging that went out that said, well, one of Thomas Massey's top individual donors is in fact Jewish. So when you say he's not taking money from AIPAC, well, you're just lying because he's got a top donor. And I was like, wait. So I do a little research on it. This guy's given him like 36 grand over the past decade, and his big issue is that he doesn't want them to ban TikTok. It's like, well, Thomas Massie doesn't support banning TikTok because he believes in property rights. So he's not changing his principles or his policy making or his voting record to go along with one of his donors. He's getting funded because this donor realizes that Thomas Massie is the type of guy that if he stays in power will continue to vote in a way that he finds beneficial to himself. There's nothing wrong with that. It's when you change. It's when you change your votes. It's when you change your opinions because of what your donor wants you to do. That's where it becomes problematic. I just wish people understood that.
Well, who's donating to him? Do you know the name?
They messaged me it. I don't remember it offhand. Sorry. It wasn't any like famous person.
I mean, it's definitely worth bringing up. I like Thomas Massie a lot, but it's like, I think he votes pretty ethically. However, if someone can prove that he took $36,000 from someone, regardless of their ethnicity, and changed his opinion or did something against America's interest, I think it's got to be part of the equation. Like, I wouldn't try to stop that conversation, but if you're going to say Thomas Massie took $36,000, then you got to say that Trump and the GOP took $600 million. Trump has taken hundreds of millions of dollars from these things. I'm willing to talk about it all. So it's like, I don't think Thomas Massie necessarily gets a pass, but it's the same thing.
I'm not saying he does. Hold on. I'm not saying he deserves a pass. I'm just saying it didn't change his voting. Like, he wouldn't have voted for the TikTok ban regardless. He's never been for it. Had he flip-flopped, had the guy been like, hey, I see that you're going to vote to ban TikTok, and then he ships him 36 grand, and then Massie all of a sudden votes to not ban it, I'd be like, all right, yeah, that's a fucking problem. That's just not what happened, though. Whereas with Trump, it's like, yeah, he campaigns on maybe we shouldn't be bombing Yemen, maybe we don't need to go to war with Iran or whoever else, and then he gets into power after getting $500 billion in AIPAC funds, and all of a sudden he's like, yeah, let's launch a couple strikes on Yemen, and maybe we'll go to war with Iran too. Well, I think that's a bigger problem.
I guess people could argue that Trump wants to do these things anyway, and then he just gets money for it. I don't agree, but
well, maybe, but that's not what his campaign slogans were.
I noticed when DeSantis was running for office and, people wanted to look for angles to help Trump over DeSantis, the same people who helped cover up the IHRA anti-Semitism laws and rules, they started saying, well, DeSantis is trying to criminalize hate speech. DeSantis is passing a bill for anti-Semitism. And it's the same people who justify when Trump does it. So I do know that DeSantis did take it kind of extraordinarily far with the littering bill. But in general, it's just like, does anybody actually care about anything? It's a big game for a lot of these people. It's just a game of like, let's destroy that guy because Trump doesn't like him. For me, I don't like anybody in Congress literally besides Thomas Massie. He's one of the only people I like. He was the only person that called out the COVID spending bill. To me, that was the ultimate test. Like, no one in the GOP had an issue with it because Trump wanted it passed, and everybody's afraid to like get mad at Trump. And then he was the only one who's like, not only are they trying to pass it, but they're trying to hide their vote. So you don't even know who said yes or no. So it becomes like the biggest spending bill of all time that nobody knows who voted for it. Everything crazy. He said was right. And then Trump tried to kick him out there. So it's like, I don't know who's doing what against Massey for what reasons. I'm guessing some people it's just sports team and they like Trump. Others, it's, Thomas Massey is very hated by Jewish organizations on both sides, not for being hateful, but for trying to cut foreign aid and call out the anti-Semitism rules. So you have the Republican Jewish coalition, I believe, saying that they're going to spend unlimited money against him. And I noticed that Vivek Sneakaswamy was on stage with them a couple of years ago, talking about all this stuff. So it's like, people think he's going to be like a Thomas Massey. The real Thomas Masseys have organizations like that funding your opposition, not putting you on stage. So, I mean, we'll see what he does in wherever he is when he gets a chance, Ohio. But I just found that interesting. That organization that he spoke at was running crazy. They just don't want Massey in there. So everybody kind of has their own, I guess, angle of why they don't like Massey, but I like him,
My frustration is just that, like, Massey is probably the most transparent member of Congress when it comes to his voting record. Like, even when he takes a vote that he knows that his supporters are probably not going to like, he'll go live and he'll explain it. He'll be like, look, on its face, yes, I understand why you think I ought to be voting yes for this. This is why I'm voting no. And he'll explain it. And every single time I've ever watched it, even when I disagreed going into it, I came away going, that makes perfect sense. Like, as soon as he explains it, I'm like, that makes perfect sense. So it's just very frustrating that the guy who's the most transparent, the most honest, the most principled, the most America first, sincerely, is dragged through the mud by the America first president. The guy who got put in power for a second term because he ran on this America first campaign, which is what I liked about him. And then to turn around and try and, get him primaried after you've already done that, by the way. He already tried to do that, and they burnt a crazy amount of money. I don't remember how much it was. It was like a couple $1 million trying to get him out last go around. He still won by 2/3 of the vote. Like, this dude's not going anywhere. Massey is not going anywhere. He's extraordinarily popular. And by the way, he raised, in part because of people like you and I, $350,000 over the past week. Once Trump said that he wanted him out, all of the grassroots people were like, "Fuck that! Here, Thomas, take some money." So, but this is all relatively minor on the grand scheme of things. What's really problematic is that we only got one. We've got fucking Thomas Massey, and that's about it. And all of the rest of the congressmen, even the ones that are like okay, they don't have a fucking real spine, dude. They're not going to really stand up and try and cut spending. And this entire argument that they're going to cut spending in September, but they can't do it now, is just a lie. And your point earlier about Elon Musk, how he talks about how existential this spending is and how it has to be dealt with. Where's fucking Elon Musk dragging the Congress through the mud saying, hey, what the fuck are you guys doing? I'm risking my reputation, my all of my multi-billion-dollar businesses to try and deal with this spending issue via Doge, and then you guys are going to continue with the spending record of the Biden administration, the largest spending bill in human history. You're going to just continue it despite the fact that we're not in lockdowns anymore. It's just, there's just no one that's real, man.
Yeah, I think everyone's playing a different game. And like Thomas, Trump, not just people like me and you, but I think Trump keeps making him more famous because, to be honest, Thomas wasn't really fully on my radar until Trump got pissed at him the first time. And then I was like, let me look into this. And I was like, oh, yeah, that guy's right. I was like, that guy's right. Trump's wrong. So Trump has helped him tremendously. I'm sure Thomas loves the attention because it's just helping him. With the Elon thing, it's like, Thomas Massey is a congressman. He gets voted by the people of Kentucky. And this is the character that he's chosen to play. He's our modern Ron Paul. He tells the truth. He's right about almost everything, and everybody hates him until 10 years later they'll realize he was right, like Ron Paul. Yeah. With that being said, Elon Musk is one of the biggest billionaires in the world. He owns multiple companies. He's one of Trump's biggest donors at this point, if not his biggest donor. And he's basically partnered with Trump, where he knows that Trump will give him the keys to the Doge castle as long as he doesn't cross Trump. So he has to play a different game. Because let's just say Elon Musk actually agrees with Thomas Massey, which is very likely. I think if he comes out and he starts challenging Trump, Trump's going to be like, who the hell do you think you are? Like,
right.
You get to do everything because I let you. So even with the media, they're trying to drive a wedge between Trump and Elon. We're using Trump's ego and Elon, this and that. And Elon hasn't taken the bait. He's letting Trump know very smartly, like, this is a lie. I love you. You're the man. We're friends. So I think that's the difference. And I'm not making excuses for Elon, but it's like not only is he not a congressman, but he doesn't have the ability to do that. And that's the interesting thing the interesting thing about freedom. And it's like, if you want freedom to travel, being rich is really important, as long as you can get access to every country. But if you want the freedom to be an honest man, sometimes, connections actually destroys you. Like you remember the time that Elon said what he still believes, I'm sure, which is like, some guy noticed that certain Jewish organizations, not all, but certain Jewish organizations were pushing anti-white hatred. And then Elon responds to it. He said, "You have said the actual truth." And then after that, he went on a huge apology tour with Ben Shapiro and, had to go to a foreign country. And it's like, he's never said anything like that. Do I think he mysteriously doesn't think that now? No, he probably still knows that that's happening, but he can't say it. Like, he's too powerful and he can't do it. Same with like Charlie Kirk. Not only does he have huge gums and a massive forehead, which is fine, but, I only make fun of him because I feel like he's the ultimate sellout. I think he knows better, but he's so tied to donors through his organizations that he can't be a Thomas Massie. I bet he has a few beers and tells everybody he agrees with everything Thomas Massie says. He's probably agrees with a lot of the people that he constantly smears as anti-Semites. Like, Charlie knows all that stuff. He's not stupid. There's a big brain inside that massive forehead, and he's got a high IQ, almost as high as his gum line. But it's like he can't be Thomas Massie because he's too tied to donors. So, it just shows you that, like, if you want money, if you want power, if you want to suck on donor teat in order to get millions of dollars for your organization, you can do that. You can get rich, you can get powerful, you can get some hot chick that, you would never get if you didn't have that position of power. And all that's, good stuff. But deep down inside, I think you'll always know that you're a fraud, and it's like, I like the Thomas Massies of the world more. It's like, everything's not a competition, but if you're the richest man in the world and you're not even free to say which organizations you notice hating on your ethnicity, you're not free. If you have a massive forehead and a giant gum line the size of Kentucky, but you're not allowed to say the truth because then you'll lose your donor money, you're not a free man.
You ain't free.
So
no,
there's
you're
levels
right.
to this game.
Look, I am, I guess, a bit of a pragmatist in that, like, I will, even though I personally wouldn't do it, I will forgive some level of selling out if it's in service of a greater good. Like, if as a consequence of shutting up about the anti-Semitism laws, it enabled us to get rid of the income tax, I would shut up about the anti-Semitism laws. Like those are the type of like sellouts that are trade-offs that I would be willing to make. But like, that's not what's on the table. I don't have those. I don't have that fucking options being given to me. And your point about Elon Musk is well taken. I completely agree with you that if he were to speak out, he would probably be ousted and Doge would probably be shut down or handed over to somebody else. So I understand why he's not speaking out. But at the same time, like, there are moments in life where if you're not willing to stand up when it really, really fucking matters, well, then you're just useless. And I think that like what Massie did in 2020 at the height of lockdowns when they were trying to pass the largest spending bill in human fucking history. And he's the only guy out of probably 200 Republicans at the time that was willing to actually get up there and say, yeah, look, if you're going to vote for this, we're going to have a fucking recorded vote, you lunatics. And as a consequence of that, he's the only one with a spine, the only one with the courage to do it. And he gets threatened with a primary. And it's just like, look, I voted for Trump. So obviously I've forgiven a lot of his failings. But I will say this, if he starts a fucking war with Iran, I am so off this bandwagon. I can't even, your head will spin how fast I'll get off this bandwagon. Like, that is the ultimate nail in the coffin of America first, of Make America Great Again, of getting our budget in order, of figuring out anything new or different from the old guard neoconservative GOP. It just can't happen. And I hope any Trump supporters that are out there that agree with me that going to war with Iran is a fucking catastrophe, that you will not be a coward, that you will stand up when it matters, and you will do what Thomas Massie does, which is say something. Fucking voice your protest. Sure, maybe it doesn't make a difference, but say it anyways.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, I always try to think logically about the situation. It's like, what's going to stop, it's a numbers game. I think that would have to stop stuff. And that's why, it's hard to tell what's going to wake people up. I do think that a lot of people have woken up, but for example, the people that are just like, screw it, let Democrats win because then people will wake up, well, actually, that's not true because Democrats are going to ruin everything. And then Republicans are going to rally behind Trump or somebody like Trump to fix it. And then Trump does it. And then there's excuses. And then a Democrat gets in. Or like even with the whole January 6th thing, like people said it was an op afterwards, like after they fell for it, after they went, after they got tricked. And then a year or two later, like, yeah, it was an op. If it was an op, then why'd you fall for it? But I'm not saying it's their fault, but I'm just in general, it's like, I felt like beforehand something was up, just because he was selling vaccines. Like I didn't trust him, but it was the perfect thing because it did all these things. First of all, it got everybody in trouble. Then the FBI just started going crazy on Trump supporters and anybody in his vicinity. And then also it gutted out the anti-lockdown protests, which were going to happen because the country was in shambles. And when Biden was in office, like there needed to be some peaceful resistance, and it gutted the complete movement. And then on the other side of it, it turned Trump into this pariah figure where now instead of actually realizing that he's on television saying the vaccine saved 100 million lives and it's this great medical achievement of mankind, everybody's talking about January 6th. And then when Trump got arrested by Alvin Bragg, now Trump's the victim and he's got the mugshot. So it's like this never-ending hero story that's never going anywhere. I obviously think he's better than Biden, but to what you were saying, the reason I'm saying all this is like, what's going to, when are people going to figure this out? It's hard for me to tell where it's like, it's not him losing because then people will just get mad at the Democrats and want a Republican. It's not him winning. And to those who are mad at me for voting for him, one, my vote doesn't matter. Like he would have won anyway. Literally, it's like one vote in California. It didn't matter. But also it's like, it's not like if he loses, everybody wakes up, the same stuff goes on. And then there's that same false hope that the Republicans are going to fix it. So, I'm not really that interested in like, oh, let's talk about the election. No, because it doesn't matter. We're not voting our way out of this. Right. I vote strategically, but what's going to make people wake up? I don't get it at this point. I can't, no offense, but like I can't relate to people that are this dumb at this point, but a lot of people really are. So that's the real question is like, at what point do they see through this, or are the elites just smarter than them where they can constantly like concoct
they're smart.
This? Dude, there's people that think that, like, do you remember Michael Rappaport used to be the biggest Trump hater? Like he used to make Keith Olbermann style videos where he's like foaming at the mouth, just being like, Trump, orange man bad. Like it was like, you actually thought like something was wrong with that.
Donald Trump. Yeah.
Now he's the biggest Trump supporter because of, Trump's Zionist Israel stuff. And everyone's like, he's based, he's this. Bro,
it's like no, the fuck he isn't.
You think someone could go from hating him that bad? Like, the only thing that changed is Israel. As far as the borders and stuff, like now all these people are like, yeah, they don't really care, else they would have cared then. It's all for the country that they like more. And it's just like, I don't care. I don't care. He has a right to like Trump for whatever reason. But it's like they're Trump supporters that like will fall for that and be like, he's just like me now. And it's like, it's like too easy to trick these people. So, I hear what you're saying. I guess I don't know what it's going to take. I don't know what it's going to take. I don't know when people will wake up, if they will. I think there's been a lot of progress for sure, over the last couple of years, but there is that huge group that they just never get it. And I just don't want to stress myself out over it because, these people are calling me names in the comments that could get me in trouble. Like they're giving me these false labels that then the Trump government can use. And it's like my own supporters are trying to get me in trouble because I said one thing. So now if I don't want this guy deported this second and I want to think about it and make a rational stance, you're going to accuse me of something that they're literally using to justify bombing people overseas. Like that's what you want to happen to me if you're calling me that. I'm not stupid. Yep. So it's like these people not only won't listen, but it's literally like they want to treat you like the enemy for just pointing something out. So I don't know why I even went on that whole rant, but I'm just like, I don't know what the answer is.
Well, and then on top of that, even if they're not worried about you and I, just be worried for yourself. Hey guys, J6, you guys were fucking labeled as insurrectionists. If there was these laws, if they label you as a domestic terrorist, they could throw your ass in Gitmo and never give you a trial again.
1,000%.
Yeah, the Democrats could absolutely do that to you. And like, you're going to just sign off on these because someone told you that the Houthis are fucking, Nazis or whatever dumb propaganda shit you're falling for now. It's like these people
and that
they
probably
never learn.
Is the next, like in the elites little playbook, that probably is it. Like let Trump label this a terrorist organization, let him strip the First Amendment, start with the green card, then go to the students, The Republican Fox News droolers will cheer it on because, you know, Mark Levin told them that they're beating up the terrorists. And now that the term has changed, now all it will take is one false or real flag for Trump supporters. And no offense, they're probably dumb enough to fall for it again, just like they did the first time, and set themselves up. And then it's like, then the Biden administration can literally, instead of doing what they did for January 6th, now they could do it to an even higher extent and basically say, not only are we going to arrest everybody who did it, but we can arrest everyone who didn't, everybody who supports it, everybody who's aligned with it,
Bingo.
Everybody who is in any way, shape, or form not completely condemn this, or else you are the terrorist. And if you are the terrorist, now, like, that's got to be their next plan, because it's too easy at this point. And the fact that everyone's falling for it, you know, I have to give credit to two people that I saw, not Eric Weinstein, because he's an absolute idiot, but Brett Weinstein, the smarter of the two. You know, he's like, dude, I'm totally against this. He's like, but from a First Amendment standpoint, this has to be looked at. Yes, correct. Thank you. Some guy, I forget his name, but Glenn Greenwald retweeted him. He's super pro-Zionist, and he said, listen, I hate Mahmoud Khalil. I think he's disgusting. I think he's a dirtbag. I think he's evil. He's like, but this is the Constitution, and I don't agree with this. And I'm like, thank you. That proves that you have loyalty to America, and that proves that you actually value the Constitution. If that's the case, then it doesn't matter if you're a Zionist or this or that. Like, that's what America's about. The issue is, it seems like a lot of people on that side have no care whatsoever for anything in America. Nope. And then you notice it and they say you're being anti-Semitic. So it's like, you know, I have seen a few people on that side be willing to tell the truth about it. So, you know, only time will tell. But yeah, I mean, it's really creepy watching Trump push the George Bush agenda and people literally fall for it. And him, in some cases, going even further than George Bush. I think he's going further than George Bush on the whole terrorist thing, like perverting what the word terrorist means and using it to attack his enemies.
Just like, consider how many terrorist organizations, or organizations that have been labeled as terrorist organizations, have suddenly, you know, gone away and become like no longer a problem. It's like, I mean, they rebrand. Al-Qaeda rebranded. They became a bunch of different acronyms. Like, but like, did they go away? So like, do we really want to label like fucking Sinaloa cartel and all these organizations as terrorist organizations? Like, do you think, given that most of the activities that they do in America are not terroristic? I mean, they bring in drugs, but like, are they using political violence to change our laws, to change our government in America? The answer is no, usually not. But do you think that they might start that if you start calling all of them terrorists and you're fucking using drones against them? It's just like, I just don't think people think these things through. I just don't think they extrapolate from like our history. This isn't ancient history. I mean, it's 20 years ago.
That's another topic. I'd have to really think about it to agree with you, because like part of me disagrees. But here's what I will say: if you're gonna take on the cartels, do you think you should be spending time policing anti-Semitic speech online and starting like a 5-front war in the Middle East? You know, like, because it's like, you know, the cartels are no joke. Like, they're no joke in Mexico and even in America, like you said, where it's like, is America more powerful? Sure, but not when you're split 1,000 different ways. And like you said too, there's going to be some repercussion to some extent. So it's like being spread so thin.
Well, it just shows a lack of priority.
Let's just say this. Okay, say they go after the cartels, which they're probably to some extent doing. Should they make it illegal and go after people who support the cartels? You know, like, technically they could say you're a terrorist for saying that. Like, I always say for Mexico, no offense, I'm not a huge fan of visiting because of that whole situation, but they are like, if you don't have a real plan, then Mexico is going to get worse, because it's like you'll destabilize it like you've destabilized every country. So It's not a justification for what they're doing. It's just the reality of the situation. They could say, well, we've labeled the cartels a domestic terrorist organization, and Clint sympathizes with the cartels, so now Clint is a terrorist. Like, these are the games they could play, where it's like, you know,
well, and let me go on the record before I get thrown in Gitmo. I don't sympathize with them, but I understand what you're doing.
I'm not saying you did. I'm
you're saying what they would
say you did.
No,
just by you having like a logical idea of trying to figure out what's going on. I'm not trying to. I'm just saying, like, they did label them a terrorist organization. So now it's like, there are going to be people who are like, you know what? They hold the cities down in Mexico. They keep it safe and secure. That's a statement. That's not a sympathy. You know, that's just the reality of the situation. That would be like me saying, if you you go after Gaddafi, like there's going to be destabilization, or if you get rid of Bashar al-Assad, they're going to destabilize.
Why do you love Assad? Why do you love Gaddafi? What's wrong with you? It's
yeah,
ridiculous.
I just don't know. I mean, they're doing so many things. I just wonder how they're going to do all these things while sitting online crying about hate speech for Israel. Like, it's like, how does that fit into the schedule? Like, you're fighting a 5-front war, and you're going to spend your ICE resources going after like Jewish Palestinian activists on a college campus. Like, no offense. I mean, there should be some conversation to be had about what these people are doing, but the fact that ICE is getting involved now, like, how do we even have the capabilities to do all these things we're doing in the world and deport citizens and go after like Jewish Palestinian activists?
Why the fuck does the GOP care about what the Ivy League is allowing to transpire on their college campuses? This is an indoctrination mill for the most radical, dangerous leftists in this country, and it has been for 100 years. And you're going to save them from themselves? Tell me how that's to the advantage of the fucking GOP. I don't see it. Like, let them figure it out. And by the way, when you riot, when you fucking kidnap people or stop people from moving, those are all crimes already. You could have fucking, if the college campuses wanted to stop those issues when they got out of hand, they could have done so. You didn't need to have fucking ICE involved. You didn't need to have hate speech laws. You could have actually just dealt with the laws as they stand, which is equal treatment under the law for all people, no special treatment for any individual. That's how you should have handled it. But instead, the GOP, because of their donor class, decided to bridge that divide and bail out the Ivy League from themselves. It's ridiculous.
I want to say two things real quick. One, yeah, I mean, it's for Israel. It's for the donors that donate to the Ivy League that then pulled their donations and gave them to Trump for Israel. So it's like these people are not concerned about all the leftist Marxism. They're only concerned when it crosses the path of Zionism. That's clear, but obviously that's also hate speech. But, with that being said, I wanted to ask you, I'm trying to think. I had a good question. Oh, yeah. You're probably more libertarian than me to some extent. So I wanted to ask you what you think of this. If Trump can get involved, like, and this is the crazy part about that, is like if he got involved and said, everyone who broke into a class, that's a crime and we're going to handle you. That's a lot different than going after a green card holder who literally didn't commit a crime. Like Trump's, like, of all the things to do, to me, it was just like the dumbest missed opportunity. But here's my thought. I lived in Los Angeles, right? Every day there's violent criminals being let out of jail who should be, like, literally they've committed crimes that you should be in jail. You have homeless people all over the streets just destroying it. And I mean, if DeSantis could get mad about an anti-Semitism littering and give you a felony or whatever, like how is that not a crime to just destroy the street and just trash it and terrorize it? So here's my question. Would you be okay as a libertarian? Because I'm always like, people are like, oh, you don't care about the college campus, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, I'm just saying, of all the things that matter to me, that's not even a top like 40 priority. And if he's going to do that, like, why not? Why isn't he just going to Los Angeles and clean up all the homeless? Why isn't he going to Los Angeles and make sure like 3-time violent criminals actually go to jail instead of like driving down to Orange County and killing somebody and then finally getting arrested for the 4th time? Like, doesn't he have a legal authority to actually do actual crimes more than he has to get involved in a First Amendment case?
Yeah, to create new crimes.
Right.
Look, I actually got into a big fight with Tim Pool over this because he was saying he wanted Trump to basically save New York from itself. And my argument has been that I am not interested in saving states from themselves. Like, we have the federalist model means that you have 50 states and that they have their own electoral process to bring in their own governors to reflect the policies, the principles, the beliefs of the local population as closely as possible. Californians, by and large, assuming that the elections are legitimate, want these policies. So as far as I'm concerned, the federal government should not intercede unless it violates the Bill of Rights. Like, that's the only area where I think that the federal government might have authority. And even then I tend to side on states' rights.
Cool. Let me ask you this. Say like Louisiana, it's a deep red state, yet New Orleans is like the murder capital of the country. And you'll notice, and Gavin Newsom talks about this, he's sneaky with it, but Republicans will say, well, all the cities are Democrat, which is true, but the states are Republican. What rights do you think they have? Because this is the thing, it's like all the major cities are just starting to suck. Like almost every major city in a red state sucks. And it seems like there's nothing that Republicans say they can do, but it's like, do you think that the governor has any authority? Like,
yes, absolutely. Governors, I mean, we discovered during COVID and lockdowns how much power governors have. And they have extraordinary power if they want to wield it. So the reality is that most of the time they don't want to. And the sad truth is that almost all of these cities are Democrat mayors, and Democrat politicians that because once you get to a very dense population, center, you end up voting for Democrats. I don't know why that happens, but it does. As a consequence, you end up with these fucking insane progressive policies that destroy the city. Like I'm obviously sympathetic to what you're saying. I grew up in Southern California. I watched it be devoured by progressivism. I am very much opposed to everything that transpired, but I do not think that the answer is to have the federal government intercede, because then you have the precedent of the Biden administration interceding into Florida, into Texas, or the Harris or the AOC administration saying, "Oh, well, we're declaring that I don't know, gun crime in Florida is a public health emergency, and now we're going to fucking supersede your legal system to start to prosecute people for having AR-15s or something like that." Like,
that makes sense.
Yeah, it's very dangerous, man. It really is.
And this is one thing I was thinking too, is like, he's getting involved in liberal college campuses in liberal cities. So it's like now he's going to liberal cities to do that. But also with the states, like, do you think this is what pissed me off during COVID? All the Democrat governors use their power to just destroy the state, and they're like, we have the power. But then in red states, they didn't seem to have the same power to stop it. It's like the blue cities did whatever they wanted, and the red governors did nothing, but the blue governors did something. I agree with you on what you said federally. You made a great point for that. But it's like, do you think they just don't want to get involved? Like, say like Memphis or New Orleans, or you could think Baton Rouge. You could think of like every city is like destroyed in the South and in a red area. Do you think that they're just afraid of the consequences? Like, one, they wouldn't know what to do. Two, it might seem racist because just the demographics of what's going on there. Three, the mayors would fight them like Colorado's doing to Trump. So it's like, I guess this is my point, and then I'll kick it over. It's like, whether I like Trump or not, I guess I'm just so annoyed at like people that are obsessed with him, because they think everything's like you hate them or you like them. But I'm like, the GOP has no plan. Like, our cities are going to keep getting worse. They're going to keep voting Democrat. The Republicans are going to do nothing. Like, they're going to keep I don't know. It's just like, I just don't feel like this is ever going to change, and nobody seems to care. And as an American, I'm just embarrassed. Like, Tokyo has an awesome city, Japan, and our cities are trash, and that's just who we are now. We're just the trashy city, high crime, dirty country, I guess. Yeah, we never were that, but now that's just what we are, and no one seems to have a plan for it. Literally no one.
Yeah, well, I think that there's two major factors that have to be remedied if you want to reverse that decline, and it's probably border safety and it's inflation. Like, if you start to get the currency under control, I think we might be able to get back to single earner households and repair some of our cultural framework that's been degraded. But I agree with your I guess disappointment in the GOP governors who do not intercede on behalf of cities in their red states. As for the blue states, I feel like they just get what they deserve. But you're right. I mean, the GOP does not step up. They don't wield power in the way that the left does. They really never have, at least not in my lifetime. Despite all of the protestations of the left that try and describe Trump as some power mad dictator, like he doesn't do much. Like, there was this huge fight yesterday over whether or not they were going to turn around a flight of 200 Tren de Agua gang members because some single judge told them that they couldn't do this, and Trump's people said, well, they're already over international waters, so it's too late, we're going to ship them. And they're like, look at this dictator, he's deporting these gang members. I'm like, I don't give a fuck. Deport these gang members.
This is the problem with this country, is like, the left is just so dumb. It's like anything that they're right about, they just discredit by being wrong about almost everything, where it's like all these things that Trump's doing, and you can't even stick to the one or two wrong things he's doing that right wingers agree with you on. You have to pick like, oh, I want these gang members to stay in America. It's like, that's your cause, so that's why I go so hard on the right. Like, the left to me is just non-existent. I'm like, they're gone. Too dumb. I don't, and like, when I'm defending them, I'm not defending them for them. I mean, I'm just being honest, where it's like, this is the problem with the right, is they think everything's left and right. Like, I've seen a lot of people talking about with Israel, Palestine, they're like, oh, what's the point? The left would have thrown you to the, like, even Marco Rubio said, oh, I find it really funny now that they care about free speech. which is basically him admitting that he's violating free speech. He's like, yeah, we're violating free speech, but now you care, which is like the dumbest talking point, because you're admitting that you're infringing on it. And there's some of us here where it's like, the right gets mad at me when I do this. The left gets, like, we're not seeing it as left and right. Like, they're just using the left and right against each other, where the left would never have been against pharmaceutical censorship 15 years ago. But through Donald Trump and through brainwashing and MSNBC and CNN and all these liberals turning into like hipster, it doesn't even make sense, because you used to go to Portland for the healthy stuff. You used to go to all these places for the good ingredients. The hipster liberals used to be the healthy ones. And now it's like the healthy moms, like now they're right-wing nut jobs. And it's like they brainwashed the Democrats to try to censor criticism of big pharma. And then they'll be like, oh, it's not right-wing. You just got brainwashed into thinking it's right-wing. And then hold
on. They fucking defended the FBI when it tried to coup Donald Trump. The FBI, who's responsible for taking out Martin Luther King Jr. And they're the FBI are our heroes. They're our defenders. The deep state is our savior. It's amazing.
And this is the sad part about both sides, is like, I don't know that anyone cares about anything. Like, they just want to win, but they don't realize, like, Democrats don't realize them winning means losing everything, because they're wrong about almost everything. They can't run a city. They're idiots. And then the right just wants to win too, but they don't realize that their foreign policy has literally destroyed the West and America. So it's like, just like we make fun of the left, when they win, everybody loses. You're also losing too. They just can't fathom it. It's like the Bolsheviks have the most horrific, domestic policy. They ruin everything they touch on the left. Yet they're also at the top, run by people like Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, who are neocons and neoliberals anyway. So it's like, it's the worst of both worlds on the left. You get nothing, you lose. It's like Gene Wilder and Charlie Kirk. He's like, you lose, you get nothing, goodbye. It's like when he's dismissing Charlie for cheating. And then you go to the right, and it's like they're kind of doing the right things domestically, sort of. But their foreign policy, in my opinion, has ruined America and Europe. And it's like, yeah, this is the better option, but not because it's actually better. It's like, out of 100, the Democrats are like a 2 out of 100, and the Republicans are like a 15 out of 100. You guys are not an A+. You guys aren't even an F. You guys are like Elise Stefanik when it comes to domestic policy, an F. It's
right. Well, and just to kind of put a bow on this, you keep saying that they're the Bolsheviks, like the left are the Bolsheviks. Well, and then the rest, the moderates, or even the GOP, many of them are neocons. It's very important for people to understand the ideological predecessors to the neoconservative movements were Trotskyites, like literal fucking Trotskyites. So yes, you're right. Both sides of this coin, the shit coin that we have to flip every cycle, are basically Bolsheviks and Trotskyites on both sides of the coin. And as a consequence, we continued to have our liberties obliterated. And it's really up to the people to demand that change. And if they can't, well, then don't expect things to change. And you don't get change by hero worship or ignoring the failings of your dear leader in Donald Trump. I voted for him. I will defend him when the media lies about him. But when he does stuff that is 180 degrees from what he campaigned on, I feel obligated to call it out, and that's why I do. And I know you're the same way, so thank you for doing
real quick, and then I'll pass it back for you to wrap it up. Mark Levin's a perfect example, because he's a super neocon Zionist, and all the Bolsheviks and the left and all these people, the Democrats, the neoliberals, they all supported the war in Ukraine, but he also supported the war in Ukraine. Obama and all of those type of liberals, they supported the essentially attack on Bashar al-Assad. So did Mark Levin. And then Mark Levin has the nerve to post after the Christians are getting slaughtered in Syria. And he's like, all those anti-Semites are the reason this is happening. It's like, bro, all the people you smear were warning that this would happen while you were cheering on this happening. As soon as it happens, then he acts like he was on the side against it when he has got multiple posts saying to throw Bashir all out, kill him, get rid of him, whatever. Like, I don't know if he said kill, but he definitely supported the overthrow of Bashar al-Assad, and there's proof of that. But in general, it's like, why would Mark Levin, a right-wing Zionist neocon, why does he align with the Bolsheviks in Ukraine? Isn't that a little bit weird? And a lot of the people at Fox knows too. Like you said, it's two sides of the same coin. If they came out and just told you, we are the neoliberals, no, everyone, they have to be like, no. Like, we support Donald Trump. I mean, I'm Sean Hannity. I'm throwing a football here. Football, America, football, soy milk.
You see my CIA Le Pen pill? That means
Le Pen, football, Nerf ball. Slurp down your seed oils, folks. We're getting to the point of the wars. And like, it's like these people it's just too hard. It's just too sad to be like, wait, it's not the left versus the right. It's the Bolsheviks versus like the neo-Bolsheviks,
Yeah, dude.
Yeah, but
and
whatever.
then think about fucking Bobby Kennedy. Bobby Kennedy's arguing that we have basically a public health crisis where everyone's got all these comorbidities and we're all fucking dying earlier. And his first like major action as the head of HHS is to concern himself with anti-Semitism on college campuses.
Bro,
Are you fucking kidding me?
It's humiliating. Like,
Yeah.
Bobby Kennedy was the only person I semi-liked. I told everybody, he's not doing foreign policy, so who cares? He's just focused on the food. He couldn't even do anything for the food before he's crying about anti-Semitism and the Fruity Loops. And it's just like, oh, it's a plague. It's a greenhouse gas. Hate speech for one, and he's like, but I'm pro free speech, bro. Look up what the word means on the State Department. Like, all these people are playing stupid, like they don't know what the official definition is. Bobby got accused of anti-Semitism because they caught him at a private dinner. Somebody recorded him, which is messed up, but he was talking about reading a study where it was affecting different ethnicities in a different way, and he got called an anti-Semite. He is an anti-Semite according to his own little rules that he keeps pushing. It's like, it's humiliating. It's like they can't just do like 80% for that. They have to do it all just to tell us like, nah, sorry, you're not getting anything. But
I mean,
hopefully he gets the seed oils out. Maybe he'll replace the seed oils with like Israel oils. He's like, I made a new seed called an Israel seed, and then we're gonna put these seed oils and everything. And you're like, dude, no, I'm just kidding. Like, come on, bro. Like, what about the beef tallow?
He's like, we're going to save $1 trillion because we're not going to have seed oils, and we're going to ship that $1 trillion straight to Israel for their war against Iran. It's like, holy fucking shit. Anyways, I'll put in the description where people can follow Anomaly, but if you got any links, go ahead and tell people.
Dreamer.com. Get yourself a beanie. Tim Pool, get yourself two. Make sure it's extra tight. Squeeze it on there.
If anybody wants to support my work, you can subscribe to me on X at Liberty Lockpod. I'll follow you back. Liberty Lockdown's the show. Make sure you leave 5-star reviews wherever you're listening right now, and share it around with your friends, family, whatever else. And other than that, hug your family, kiss your mother, and tell people that you don't want to go to war with Iran. Appreciate you guys. Peace.
The issue has been that the GOP, throughout my entire life, has not turned words into action. They haven't. They've promised to defend. They've promised to defend the Constitution. When? I'm going to die before they do it. I mean, this is my deep-seated concern. They also talk about limited government. They talk about ending the wars. They talk about bringing our troops home. When? It's not happening. So the reason the Libertarian Party is as viable as it is, the reason that Donald Trump and yourself and even RFK are here this weekend is because the election margins are so thin that you guys need us. And I appreciate that you're willing to come and talk to us, because there's not real animus, particularly between you and I. I have a tremendous amount of respect for you. But there is a tremendous amount of animosity between myself and the GOP, who has ran around talking as if they're Ron Paul and then governing as if they're John McCain.
Welcome to Liberty Lockdown. Please scan your barcode. Your liberty ain't gone, but yeah, it's on hold. Where did it come from and where did it go?